Welcome to A Better Divorce podcast, where we have conversations about the emotional, financial, and legal issues that are on your mind or should be on your radar if your goal is to keep your divorce out of court. I'm collaborative divorce attorney and mediator Andrea Vacca, and I know that how you divorce matters to your long-term well-being. That's why it's my mission to help you have a better divorce with as little acrimony as possible, so that you can create the best life possible on the other side of your marriage. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to have Shannon McNulty joining me today on A Better Divorce podcast. Shannon is a highly experienced trust and estates and tax attorney, and she counsels individuals as well as families on all aspects of estate planning. And she's also the owner of the Village Law Firm based here in New York City. So Shannon, welcome to A Better Divorce podcast.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm looking forward to our discussion today about the intersection of estate planning and divorce and trust. And I know it's going to be really a helpful conversation. So I want to know, if somebody comes to you and says, Shannon, you're a lawyer. I know you don't do divorce law, but I'm thinking of getting divorced. Maybe they're a client of yours already, or they were referred to you, and somehow, what are the first things you would tell somebody who's thinking about getting a divorce with regard to their estate plan?
So the first thing I would say is you need to talk to a divorce attorney because there are a lot of things that I feel like the sooner you have that conversation with an attorney, the better off you are. Even if you're not quite sure that this is the road that you want to go down, it's just always good to get a big picture perspective of what that process is going to be like and some of the financial implications. And then the other thing in terms of estate planning is, do you still trust your spouse to make important decisions for you and to manage your money and to leave assets how you want to have them? Because estate planning has to do with all of these things. So it has to do with not just what happens when you pass away, but also really important decisions while you're still alive. And when we do estate planning, we designate people in certain roles to make those decisions for us. And even if we don't have an estate plan in place, then the state actually has default rules as to who will make those decisions. And oftentimes it's your spouse. So if you are in a position where you no longer trust your spouse to act in your best interests, then that's something you want to address right away in your estate planning document. So you want to redo your will, you want to redo your healthcare proxy, do a power of attorney. If you haven't done those already, then you definitely want to put those in place at that time.
Right. And what if they say, they have these things in place, but they want to make changes? And it's what changes are okay to make and what are not okay to make, at this point in time when they're considering divorce?
Yeah. So at least in New York State, and Andrea, I think you've educated me on this as well, is that once the divorce is filed, once it's served on the other party, basically the legal initiation of the divorce, there are certain things that can't be changed. And those are beneficiary designations on retirement accounts and life insurance beneficiaries. Or I think any changes to life insurance. So those are the two things that you can't change. And, from my perspective, if you haven't filed yet, then those are kind of fair game. But I want you to talk in a minute about maybe that's not a good idea. But anything, powers of attorney, definitely, I would say powers of attorney and healthcare proxy are the most important things, and also your will. So just those basic documents, and then depends kind of on what you've already done, but those are the three documents that are the most important.
You can't write your spouse out of your will in New York, right? We have what's called the elective share. Do you want to say a little bit about that? If you have a whole estate and you say, okay, I'm just leaving my wife $1, I'm so angry at her, I'm just going to leave her $1, what would happen? What happens if somebody dies and they've, have tried to write their spouse out of their estate or leave them very little? even if you're
Sure.
getting divorced, but you're still married. So can you talk about that elective share?
Sure. So even if you leave everything to, say, your kids or your sister or anybody else, and say, I don't want to leave anything to my spouse, they're a dirty rascal, then the spouse, if you should pass away, the spouse still has a right to 1/3 of your assets, even if you've left everything to somebody else. And I will caveat that with, unless there is a prenup in place where the spouse has waived that right.
Right. Right. And that, we often talk about that in prenuptial agreements, as to whether someone is or is not waiving their elective share. And if you die without a will, after a divorce, after you've started a divorce process and you have no will, what happens then? What does your spouse get in that situation?
So if you've started the divorce, but the divorce is not final, then basically you would start with what's in your will. And so, say if you leave everything in your will to your spouse, and it's going to go to your spouse, but if you leave everything to somebody else, then they have a right to basically say, I'm entitled to 1/3, again, assuming that there is no prenup.
But if
And
there's
that's
no will,
if
at
there's no will, I'm sorry. Yeah. So if there's no will, then your spouse is maybe entitled to 100% of your assets.
Right.
So there's a big difference between 1/3 and 100%. So it's still better to have the will and leave it to whoever you want to leave it to than for them to get everything. And that depends on if you have kids and a couple of different factors. But
Right.
generally, it's going to be more than 1/3.
Right. So do
No
some
will.
estate planning if you're considering divorce, or you're in the middle of it. So what, and we when people are thinking about changing their will, I think it's not so much about hurting their spouse, the dirty rascal, as you mentioned, but I think it's also about, I want to make sure my kids get as much as they can, and it's not so. Do you see that too? That it's more about the protecting their children, is in the back of their minds. Just, are they going about it the right way?
I think a lot of times, and uh, I'm sure you've seen this a lot, is that at the root of some of these divorces is actually financial incompatibility, let's say. And so they don't trust their spouse. Even sometimes they may say, actually, they're a pretty good person, but like they're really bad with money and it just hasn't worked out. They just don't want the spouse squandering it. And so there just may be reasons that they just don't want them managing that money. And a lot of times it is that they want to just make sure that that money is protected for the kids, regardless of their feelings for the spouse.
Right, right. Whether it's young children or adult children or children from a prior marriage, they're the thought, people are usually thinking about their kids and thinking their spouse will be fine and they'll have to take care of themselves at some point.
Yeah, and there may be other situations too, like you have a sibling who's disabled or something like that. And so it's just more, it just makes more sense to for the money to go somewhere else for you because that's more important to you.
Right. So I'm sure there's been situations where you're working with a family after someone has passed away and they are divorced. So we have someone who is divorced, they pass away. Now you're working with the family. Um, are there some common estate planning mistakes that you've seen, or even if they haven't died yet, but you're reviewing their estate plan and it could have been a major mistake? Is there anything that you would tell people now, from the lessons that you've learned or your clients have learned?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. One is, has that person remarried? So if it's a blended family where you have a step parent, a second spouse, then you definitely want to make sure that the estate is structured such that that spouse is provided for, but also your kids. Um, if you have minor children, it could be really disastrous because your spouse can end up basically acting on behalf of your kids. And I've seen this unfortunately a lot of times, whether they're still in the process of a divorce or even if the divorce is final, that there was no estate plan done and all of the money goes to the minor child, but the child can't manage it. They're not 18. And so the court oversees it and they appoint someone to manage the money for the kids. That person is usually going to be the other parent. So you now have, even though the money is going to your kids, it's still being managed by your spouse, who maybe you, again, have certain feelings about them managing the money. The other thing that happens when you have young kids and you don't have a will in place is that the former spouse is appointed to be the administrator of the estate. That means they're in charge of making sure everything goes to where it's going to go, that bills are paid, that your personal items are given to whoever they're supposed to be given to or thrown out or whatever. This is like, I say, like almost like an extreme invasion of privacy, because all of your personal items, now that person who you didn't want in your life anymore is rummaging through everything.
Your diary, your personal items, your text messages, or whatever they can get access to.
All your finances, everything.
Yeah.
So it's really heartbreaking to see that when it happens, especially like there may be, you're the person who passed away, their parent may want to be the person doing that. And then they may feel like it's really a bad dynamic when that happens. The other thing that I see a lot is that in divorce agreements or separation agreements, there's often language that requires life insurance to cover either maintenance, spousal maintenance, or child support in case the spouse dies, to cover those expenses. And then the beneficiary would be either the spouse or the children of that trust or of that life insurance policy. And that's great. So that's really important to have in those documents and that agreement. But the problem is, a lot of times I see is that the life insurance never gets put in place. And the trust, maybe in the document, in the divorce agreement, it just says it has to be in a trust. Like, a trust is so many different kinds of trusts and so many different provisions that it's almost like limitless in terms of like what that can look like. And so you're really leaving it to chance if you kind of just have general language about it being in a trust. And then even more importantly, you're really putting yourself at risk if that life insurance hasn't been purchased and something happens to your former spouse.
Right. And also, I think I want to talk more about the life insurance and the trust. One thing I tell my clients is that you have to change your beneficiary designations on your retirement accounts after a divorce, right? So once the divorce is over, you've either agreed on how to divide your retirement assets, or maybe you're waiving, the other's retirement assets depending on how you've divided everything. But then if you don't go back and change and say, my ex-wife is now removed and I name someone else, when you die, the ex-wife still gets the insurance. I mean, the
Exactly.
retirement assets, right? So that's not automatic. Have you ever seen that? Like, I tell my clients to do that, but have you ever seen that happen, and what the reaction is to the family and the kids and everyone else? Like,
It's not good.
not good. Okay.
Not good.
People don't listen, even though we tell them.
If you're fortunate, then that person might be magnanimous and say, I really wasn't entitled to this money, and so to give it to the kids or whoever was supposed to get it, but not necessarily. So they don't have any obligation to do that. And like you said, it's this really weird quirk in the law, because for other types of things, so once a divorce is final, your spousal provisions in your will, your power of attorney, your healthcare proxy, and even life insurance beneficiaries are effectively revoked with respect to your spouse. But for retirement benefits, for retirement accounts, it's governed by federal law, and so it overrides basically the state provision saying that those beneficiaries are revoked.
Oh, is there any thought about changing that law on the federal level? Did you ever hear about that? Because it makes no sense to me.
It really needs to be changed, and I'm not sure why. I mean, I can't imagine that there's like a huge who would be against that,
Right,
really?
right. It's just not important to other people, I guess. All right, so everybody, please change your retirement beneficiaries once you get divorced. Okay, and we're going to tell you one more time here. All right, so let's talk a little bit about those life insurance trusts, because I really, as the divorce attorney, often our clients are not, they don't have those trusts set up yet. It's hard enough getting all the details worked out to get separated and to sign an agreement. Our clients are negotiating, they're directly involved in talking to each other and working these things out. It could take quite many months, if not a year, to work it all out. And by the time we're done, the thought of now going to set up the trust that they need to hold their life insurance, it just doesn't happen, because again, it's just going to take so much time. So we kind of leave it to the clients to we advise them to talk to their trust and estates attorneys, or if they don't have one, refer them to someone like Shannon and talk about what a trust could look like. But the clients are rarely holding it up or interested in holding it up. They trust each other enough to go set this up. But I know we're kind of like leaving them to their own devices, and it's probably not a great idea. So when we have child support obligations in our agreements, and both parents are supporting a child, one maybe more than the other, but both parents have to support the children in some way. There's 99% of the time we have a requirement for both parents to purchase some life insurance. One might be higher wage earner and buys more insurance, and the other less. So then what happens? Like, what do you suggest our separation agreements specifically say to make that intention to set it up and create a life insurance trust as clear as possible? Is there any guidance you could give?
I would say the best case scenario is that like that trust is drafted beforehand and is included as part of the agreement and said this, or even just referencing it and saying that it will be purchased by this trust, because that trust will have in place all of the things of like, can you change the beneficiaries of that trust, right? Maybe it's not going to end up going to your kids. And so there, like I said, the trust is so vague that if you don't have that laid out, your one, your assets your life insurance, that policy that's supposed to go to your kids could end up not necessarily going to your kids. And then two, really even worse is that if your former spouse passes away and didn't have that life insurance in place at all, then all of those things you like worked so hard to negotiate, right? And unfortunately, it's expensive and time consuming and all of that anguish. And then if they pass away, it's gone. And you can claim against the estate, but they might not have any money to cover it. So you're left really high and dry, and it can be a really bad situation, right? Because you may not be able to cover all of the expenses. It can drastically change your child's lifestyle and where they go to school, all kinds of things. So if you just think of it as part of like, okay, this could just ruin my entire thing that we've worked for, then hopefully that can help people to understand the urgency of it.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm hearing, it needs to be brought up sooner, pushed more. We can't leave the clients to their own devices, because they may not do it right, they may not do it at all, and they're both taking a risk there. What happens if they and what happens if they have life insurance, okay, but they did not put it into a trust, and there was no obligation to, they just agreed to leave it to the other parent as the beneficiary. Okay, so what happens when they get that money? Is their taxes paid on it, or what happens when just it comes straight to the other parent?
It depends on the size of the person who passes away, as the size of their estate. So there could be taxes that are owed on it or not. I think the more concerning thing for me in that situation is that the money is going, if it was really for your kids and not for maintenance, that if your spouse gets remarried, then that money just isn't necessarily going to your kids.
Yeah.
And it could be any other reason, they spend it on something else. But the more frequent thing that I see is that there's another marriage, and then unless there was a prenup in that marriage, actually that spouse is entitled to a good chunk of it. So so that's really what the downside is, and why it's so important that you do want to make sure that your kids are taken care of, that all of these things be in place, and that they be in place properly, so that the trust ensures that the money is used for the purposes that you intend.
Right. Right. Okay. All right. Anything else you'd want to say on that topic, or about life insurance, or about the trust, when it comes to divorce? I'm not sure
I
if there's
feel
anything
just the
else.
most important thing is just making sure that you take care of it, because the details of it are, the lawyers figure that out, but it is your life. And like you said, it can be really, the people are exhausted going through this process, and there's things they just want to put off. But if they see it as like it's really integral to making sure that you're protected and your kids are protected, then hopefully that would prompt this being more forefront at during the conversation.
So let me ask you this. If a couple, you've been working with a couple, you're their estate planning attorney, while they were an intact couple, now they come back to you and say, look, we're getting divorced, but we both need these trusts set up, because we're going to be purchasing life insurance, or we want to move our life insurance policies into this trust. But can you represent them separately now? Or does one of them have to go find a new lawyer? Because that's another issue to discuss.
Yeah, it depends. So if they're both kind of on the same page, I can still represent them jointly if they are both deciding, okay, even though we're getting divorced, then we still want this thing and we're on board with it, and we're on the same page. That way I can represent still both of them. But in that situation, then I can't keep secrets from one or the other. The other thing is, if they decide they still want to each go forward, and they'll waive any kind of conflict. So it's okay that I'm working with both of them. We can waive that conflict. In other cases, they might want to just get different lawyers altogether. And I would say, if it's a more contentious case, then that might be a better option.
You could refer them to somebody else at that point. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Shannon. So look, the last question I have for you is what I ask all my guests. What is your one better divorce tip that you could give?
Definitely just make sure estate planning is part of the process, and you're thinking about this throughout, from the time that you have this idea that you want to get divorced, that you just want to make sure that you protect yourself, you protect your kids, you protect your loved ones, that it's just really important in this process.
Yeah, don't forget about that. Because
Yeah.
the people you love, the kids you love, your family, your extended family, they will suffer if you don't do this work properly now. And the whole point of having a better divorce is so that your extended family, your children are better off. So putting these, that's really great advice. Like think about this, because it's part of just setting everyone up for a better future. That's how I hear that.
Absolutely. Absolutely,
Thank
Andrea.
you. Thanks, Shannon. I'm so glad you could join me today. So what is the best way for people to find you?
Yeah, you can go to my website. It's www.thevillagelawfirm.com. That's probably the easiest way. And then all our contact information is on there.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. This has been another episode of A Better Divorce podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next episode.
You've been tuning in to another episode of A Better Divorce podcast with Andrea Vacca. Thank you for subscribing, leaving your positive comments and reviews, and sharing the show with others. You can watch episodes at vaccalaw.com, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can listen through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Bye for now, and remember, you can have a better divorce.